the unthinkable is happening. Florida, the state that symbolized endless sunshine, boundless opportunity, and guaranteed real estate profits, is imploding. And not in some distant future, not hypothetically, it's happening today. What was once America's most coveted destination is experiencing a housing meltdown of historic proportions. The signs are everywhere, yet thousands remain blind to the approaching storm. Empty subdivisions stretch across southwest Florida like ghost towns in the desert. Foreclosure notices pile up. Insurance companies flee the state entirely. Property values that took decades to build are evaporating in months. This isn't a market correction. This is a systemic collapse driven by forces beyond anyone's control. Climate change, insurance apocalypse, catastrophic hurricanes, and economic fundamentals that no longer make sense. The pandemic boom wasn't growth. It was a bubble inflated by temporary advantages that have now vanished into thin air. The situation today is the beginning of what a housing crisis looks like. Not the panic of a single crash day, but the slow bleed of a market death. Homes that won't sell. Owners trapped underwater. Communities hollowing out. Businesses closing. The dream turned into a nightmare, one empty house at a time. Are you prepared for what's coming? Do you know if your city is on the brink? The time to act isn't tomorrow, it's now, while you still have options. Because in 6 months, those options may have vanished entirely. Let's count down the top 10 Florida cities sliding toward ghost town status, from concerning to catastrophic. 10. Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale used to epitomize South Florida luxury. Now, it's drowning in unsold properties. With 19,440 active listings and a 27.2% year-over-year inventory surge, this coastal jewel is watching its market buckle under its own weight. Over 830 sellers have slashed their asking prices, desperately trying to offload properties that once commanded premium dollars. What went wrong? The condo crisis hit Fort Lauderdale like a hurricane. New safety regulations following the Surfside collapse have sent condo fees soaring, while insurance premiums have made waterfront living financially impossible for middle-class buyers. The Venice of America is watching its canals empty of willing homebuyers. Fort Lauderdale sits at the southern edge of Broward County, where Miami-Dade's population bleeding begins. The dividing line is clear. North of Broward, people are still moving in. And south of it? People are running for the exits. 9. Key West. How do you lose residents in paradise? Ask Key West. This island community at the tip of Florida has hemorrhaged 5% of its population between 2020 and 2023, making it South Florida's fastest shrinking city. The problem isn't demand, it's survival. Short-term rentals and Airbnbs have cannibalized the residential housing stock, pushing out actual residents. The city's neighborhoods are being eroded by nightly rentals, transforming a living community into a tourist attraction with no one left to serve the tourists. Healthcare infrastructure is collapsing too. The only cancer treatment center in the Keys closed last summer. The 2-by-4-mile island can't build its way out of this crisis. Every square foot is spoken for, and what's left goes to the highest bidder, usually someone who doesn't actually live there. Key West is becoming a beautiful graveyard of vacation homes, with the heartbeat of permanent residency fading to silence. 8. Punta Gorda. Punta Gorda leads the nation in one metric nobody wants: home price destruction. This southwest Florida city has watched median sale prices plummet 14.5% to $325,000 in a single year, with condos getting absolutely demolished at an 11.4% annual decline. Hurricane Ian didn't just damage Punta Gorda, it broke it. The 2022 storm caused nearly $115 billion in damage, and the recovery has been anything but smooth. Flooded inventory keeps hitting the market as damaged homes sell at massive discounts. Insurance companies either fled entirely or jacked premiums to unbearable levels. The strangest part? Home sales actually increased 1.7% year over year, even as prices crashed. That's not a recovery. That's panic selling meeting bottom feeder buyers. Retirees who thought they'd bought their Florida dream are now desperate to escape before the next storm hits. 7. Hialeah. Hialeah sits in Miami-Dade County, but it's a world away from South Beach glamour. This predominantly Hispanic working-class city is bleeding residents at an alarming rate. 5.59% population decline that makes it Florida's third fastest declining city overall. The poverty rate sits at 17.81%, and it's getting worse. Miami-Dade's housing crisis has particularly devastated Hialeah. While wealthy newcomers flood Miami proper, and Brickell, longtime Hialeah residents can't compete. Between 2020 and 2022, Miami-Dade County lost 79,535 people to other parts of Florida and other states, and Hialeah bore the brunt. Average household income of $67,710 can't keep pace with South Florida's runaway costs. The city exemplifies Florida's new normal. If you're not wealthy, you're gone. The middle class is being systematically erased from the region, and Hialeah is ground zero for this demographic disaster. 6. Tallahassee. Florida's capital is experiencing something unusual for an inland city: market weakness without storm damage. Tallahassee's median sale price dropped 5.2% to $340,000, with closed sales down 8.8% year over year. For a government town with theoretically stable employment, these numbers scream trouble. What's happening? Tallahassee is losing the one thing that used to keep it afloat: young professionals. The city's reliance on government, education, and healthcare can't compete with private sector wages in growing metros. Students graduate from Florida State and FAMU, then immediately leave for Orlando, Tampa, or out of state entirely. The capital is becoming a way station, not a destination, and in Florida's current market, any city that isn't growing is dying. There's no middle ground anymore. 5. St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg witnessed a 1.54% decline in the population in recent years. The housing situation here carries a very high crash risk designation. The city used to be Tampa Bay's hip alternative: affordable, artsy, and growing fast. Now it's one of 5 Florida markets flagged as dangerous and tricky by housing analysts. The city's cultural renaissance is colliding with brutal economic reality. The problem is location. St. Petersburg sits on the Pinellas Peninsula, one of the most vulnerable pieces of real estate in Florida. Hurricane risk isn't theoretical here, it's annual. Insurance costs are forcing owners to flee, with 5,600 homes for sale in Pinellas County, the highest level in 7 to 8 years. The creative class that revitalized downtown St. Petersburg is being priced out by the same forces they helped unleash. Rents are unsustainable, hurricanes are intensifying, and the peninsula geography means there's nowhere to expand. St. Petersburg is trapped between water and economic collapse. 4. Naples. Naples was supposed to be immune. As Florida's premier luxury market, filled with multi-million-dollar estates and pristine golf communities, it should have weathered any storm. Instead, it's leading the state in price destruction. The numbers are staggering. Median home prices crashed 19.2% to $767,800, and roughly 1 in 3 sellers have slashed their asking prices. Even more alarming, closed sales plunged 15.3% year over year. The ultra-wealthy aren't just being cautious, they're abandoning ship. Average time to sell climbed to 80 days by December last year, a 37.8% increase. Properties that once moved in days now languish for months. Hurricane Ian devastated Southwest Florida's tourism economy, and Naples hasn't recovered. The jobs vanished, the insurance became prohibitive, and suddenly that $800,000 condo doesn't look like paradise. It looks like a hurricane target with crushing monthly costs. The luxury market was supposed to be the last domino to fall. Naples just proved it's already tipping. 3. North Port Sarasota Bradenton. This metro area represents Florida real estate whiplash at its finest. North Port's price chart looks like a roller coaster, a steep climb through 2021 to 2022 to nearly $480,000, then a sharp decline through 2023, finishing around $420,000 by April this year. That's a $475,000 median, with a 9.9% year-over-year drop. The Sarasota area attracted retirees and remote workers in droves during the pandemic. Everyone wanted in. Builders responded by constructing everything in sight. Now, North Port Sarasota inventory hit record highs with 13,542 active listings, up 14.6% year-over-year. The supply tsunami has arrived. North Port condo prices fell 8%, and the single-family market isn't far behind. Markets that surge the fastest always crash the hardest, and North Port is textbook boom-bust. The question isn't whether it'll get worse, it's how many owners will be underwater before it stabilizes. 2. Lakeland. Lakeland was supposed to be the safe bet. Nestled between Tampa and Orlando, inland from hurricanes, growing steadily, it checked all the boxes. Real estate experts now rank it as the second most risky housing market, poised for a crash in the entire country. How did an inland city end up in such dire straits? Builders pulled over 200,000 permits in 2022, flooding the market with new construction in a reduced demand environment. Active listings surged 19.7% to 7,500 homes, and now they're sitting, and sitting, and sitting. The data reveals the danger. Lakeland's price line peaked in early 2024, just below $400,000, then showed a clear downward slope into April this year. The city is 26% overvalued compared to long-run norms, meaning there's still plenty of room to fall. Lakeland proved that location isn't everything. Oversupply kills markets whether hurricanes hit or not. Foreclosures are spiking too. Deltona and Lakeland rank in the 5 worst among metros, with at least 500,000 people for foreclosure rates. The safe inland investment is becoming a trap. And at number 1, it's Cape Coral Fort Myers, the ghost town capital. Welcome to America's emptiest housing market. Cape Coral Fort Myers doesn't just lead Florida in decline, it leads the entire nation in residential vacancy. 38.7% of homes in the market are sitting vacant, an absolutely catastrophic figure that signals complete market failure. Let that sink in. Nearly 4 out of every 10 homes are empty. This isn't a correction. This is abandonment. The price destruction mirrors the vacancy crisis. Median prices dropped 9.6% to $375,000, with condo prices falling 11.4%. But even at fire sale prices, nobody's buying. Investors are liquidating properties and taking a 20% loss from what they bought 2 years ago. Cape Coral and Fort Myers have tripled their inventory in just 2 years, with 15,425 homes actively listed and going nowhere. The metro leads the nation in rental vacancies at 38.7% as well. Even desperate landlords can't find tenants. Hurricane Ian destroyed the area's infrastructure and insurance market. The post-pandemic storm caused nearly $115 billion in damage, and the region never recovered its footing. Replacement costs skyrocketed, insurance disappeared or became unaffordable, and suddenly owning property in Cape Coral felt less like an investment and more like financial suicide. Vacancy rates are projected to rise from 8% to 17% in some segments, meaning the crisis is accelerating, not stabilizing. The Southwest Florida dream has become a nightmare of empty subdivisions, underwater mortgages, and fleeing residents. Cape Coral-Fort Myers isn't heading toward ghost town status. It's already there. So what's coming in 2026? Here are the projections that every Florida property owner should know. The worst may still be ahead. While 2025 has delivered devastating blows to Florida's housing market, the data suggests 2026 could bring the final reckoning. Multiple forecasting models point to a market that will continue deteriorating before any potential stabilization. And that stabilization may not come until late 2026 or beyond. The price bottom is still months away. Housing analysts predict Florida home values will find their bottom around mid-2026, then hover there before potentially inching upward again very gradually. Translation: we haven't hit rock bottom yet. Approximately 24 Florida housing markets are projected to see continued home price declines through the first half next year. Areas like Punta Gorda, Northport, and Cape Coral face the most significant price adjustments, markets that already lead the nation in distress indicators. The state's median home value has already fallen roughly 5% over the past year, dropping from around $398,000 to approximately $378,000. But the rate of depreciation, while slowing, hasn't stopped. Some markets could see drops of 10% or more throughout 2026, particularly those that experienced the most dramatic price surges during the pandemic boom. The inventory crisis gets worse. Florida currently has more than a 6-month supply of homes for sale, well above the national average of 3.5 months. That oversupply will continue growing through early 2026 as more homeowners who delayed selling finally capitulate and list their properties. New construction, despite slowing from peak pace, continues adding supply faster than demand can absorb it. Homes listed for sale in Florida now stay on the market for a median of 70 to 74 days, compared to the national median of 40 to 45 days. That number will likely increase through the first quarter of 2026. 3 months back, in August, it took the typical Florida home about 74 days to receive an offer, 15 days longer than a year earlier. The trend line points to even longer waits ahead. Mortgage rates, relief that won't save you. The National Association of Realtors projects 30-year mortgage rates will stabilize around 6.3 to 6.4% through 2026. While that represents modest improvement from recent 7+% peaks, it's nowhere near enough to trigger a buying frenzy. Rates remain dramatically higher than the sub-3% levels that fueled the pandemic boom, and even incremental drops won't restore affordability when combined with still elevated home prices and catastrophic insurance costs. Some forecasters predict rates could hover in the high 6% to 7% plus range through much of 2026. At those levels, buyers will remain cautious, competition among sellers will intensify, and downward price pressure continues. The dream of 5% mortgages returning soon is just that. A dream. The insurance nightmare intensifies. Insurance premiums in Florida have increased as much as 400% in just 5 years, and 2026 offers little hope for relief. While some reforms passed 2 years ago are slowly bringing private carriers back to the market. Citizens' insurance policies dropped from 1.4 million to 778,000. By July this year, premiums remain punishingly high and continue rising. For properties in flood zones, on the coast, or with older roofs, insurance costs can add $500 to $1,000 plus per month to ownership expenses. The current year hurricane season brought additional devastation, and insurers are adjusting their 2026 risk models accordingly. Expect continued selective coverage, higher deductibles, and insurance becoming the deciding factor in whether properties are even marketable. Population growth. The engine is sputtering. Florida's net migration dropped from nearly 500,000 annually during the pandemic time to under 100,000 last year. The Senate Budget Committee's warning couldn't be clearer. The combination of births, deaths, domestic migration, and international migration could result in Florida's population actually shrinking as soon as in the coming months. Without population growth, housing demand collapses. And without demand, prices have only one direction to go. The retirees are still coming, but in smaller numbers. Remote workers who flooded in during the pandemic are leaving. Younger families are being priced out entirely. The demographic engine that powered Florida's real estate market for generations is running out of fuel. So what looks like an ideal strategy at this time? What must property owners, buyers, and investors do now? Florida's housing market is entering a high-risk period, and property owners, buyers, and investors must adjust their strategies accordingly. Current owners in declining markets face a tough choice. Sell quickly, especially if they bought recently, hold high mortgage rates, or can't afford soaring insurance, or hold only if they have strong equity, stable finances, and patience for a multi-year recovery. Buyers, on the other hand, may find a rare opportunity over the next year, provided they stay patient, get fully prepared, target inland and insurance-friendly homes, negotiate hard, and avoid high-risk condos and coastal markets. Talking about investors, they must be extremely selective. Cash flow positive inland rentals, newer hurricane-resistant homes, and mid-term rental markets still work, but speculative purchases, older condos, and coastal properties with high insurance exposure don't. All groups must prioritize accurate insurance data, strong due diligence, and realistic expectations. The overarching message: Florida's 2026 Real Estate Landscape Rewards. Caution, preparation, and timing, and punishes anyone who underestimates the risks. Here's the bottom line. Florida's housing crisis isn't coming, it's here. These 10 cities represent different facets of the same fundamental problem. The three components of population growth, births, deaths, domestic migration, and international migration are all trending in the wrong direction for Florida. Experts predict an outright shrinking of the state's population could occur as soon as late this year. The pandemic boom was built on temporary advantages: remote work, low interest rates, and mass migration from expensive states. Those advantages are evaporating. What remains? Insurance premiums that have increased as much as 400% in just 5 years, intensifying hurricanes, rising sea levels, and a housing stock that expanded far beyond sustainable demand. 3 Florida metropolitan areas face very high risk of experiencing home value drops of up to 15% in Gainesville, Palm Bay, Melbourne, Titusville, and Lakeland, Winter Haven. But the Senate Budget Committee warned of something even more ominous. The combination of rising insurance premiums and historically high home prices could lead to a housing crash worse than 2008. So are you wondering if your city is next? For all of you in Florida real estate, the countdown to the crisis may have already reached zero. It's time to monitor the market closely because the ghost towns aren't coming tomorrow. They're forming today, one vacant house at a time. Do like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to see more such stories and events across the country as we hit the new year.